Hello everyone, my name is Joe Serra and I'm going to be discussing my business case for ISM 6027 today. My business case is actually on the NFL and the concussion problems that they're having. But before we get into it, just want to give you a little bit of an agenda. We're going to talk about the history of the NFL, talk about their current business problem that they're having, look at some potential solutions for them. Then we're going to look at how we came up with the solutions, looking at the cost-benefit analysis, looking at sensitivity analysis that we ran. From there, we're going to look at some alternatives that the NFL could use if they choose not to go with the solution that we have chosen for them today. And then lastly, I'm going to leave you with some quotes and from some current and former players on concussions, and we're going to tie this whole thing together. So to get started, the NFL started back in 1920. It was started by a group of basically ambassadors of some professional teams back then, but they were more like clubs. Unfortunately, the league wasn't. There wasn't a league. It was just. It wasn't. There was no structure. Teams would just schedule games together, and they'd get paid a little bit of money. These guys wanted some more structure. They wanted some formalities to the league, and so they got together and they created the first football league. Obviously, from there, the league has grown exponentially. Really through the 50s and 60s, when the AFL ended up joining the NFL, really started to get some real momentum behind it. Some of the Super Bowls started to getting more viewers. Again, obviously, not necessarily for watching the football, but for the commercials and whatnot. But as it got into the 70s, 80s, and really into the early 90s, the league became a very viable option for individuals to have a career. Not necessarily for playing, but for broadcasting, for being coaches, for being trainers. So again, people took an interest to the NFL. The sport, as of now, is the #1 sport in the world in profitability. Last year, they made $9.5 billion. This was even more than the European soccer leagues. And one of the benefits that the NFL has is they're actually considered a trade organization. So they're a 501c, so they don't have to pay taxes on the revenues, which is kind of crazy to think when they're making $9.5 billion. When we think about it from here, everything sounds great. The league's got a lot of momentum, a lot of fan base, a lot of pageantry for the sport. Unfortunately, there's some legal concerns that are in their way right now. One of them is there are some people who are trying to deem the NFL as not a trade organization. That's been around for a while, so we're not really too concerned about that at this point. However, the real concern that we're seeing is the injury to players, and more importantly, the injuries to former players, and the concussions that they've been incurring over their playing period. And that's a good tie-in to their business issue. There's a lot of former and current players who are speaking out against the NFL right now, saying that the league is negligent in not putting in rules to protect the players, and the league knows that this is an issue and they're doing nothing about it. This is such an issue that the league had to settle a very large settlement last year with 4,500 former players. The lawsuit was settled for about $765 million. And again, the league ended up settling. They didn't let it go to court, and they didn't release a lot of the other information. Right now, the current concussion problems or policies that they have in place have been improving. They have been modifying them over the years because, again, they don't want these settlements to continue. A couple of the policies that they do implement is if they see players who visibly look like they have incurred a concussion or a high impact to the head, they'll bring them off the field and examine them and give them some tests. And this is good. The only problem is this is very reactive. An individual can get a concussion and not show any symptoms and continue playing in a game, and that's really where the real harm comes to play. When you get hit hard enough to get a concussion, that's bad. The real problem, the long-term effects, comes in once you go back in or once you continue getting hit in the head. And this is an issue with boxers as well, and this is really where a lot of them get in trouble. So again, the league has a real issue with this, and again, they need to be more proactive with their dealings. Their goal for the next 10 years is to make $25 million in revenues, and get up to $25 million a year in revenues. And the way they're growing in South America and the way they're growing in Europe, this shouldn't be an issue. The only hurdle standing in their way is basically the long-term viability of the league. If the league continues to function the way they are and not changing their policies, they're going to continue to have lawsuits down the road, which are going to be even more substantial than the ones we saw today, or we're seeing today. And a lot of former players and actually pundits are coming out and saying that if the league doesn't change their policies, the league won't be around in 20 years. That they actually think that Congress or OSHA or another organization will come and actually deem the sport unsafe for the employees. So they have a serious issue that needs some attention here. So one of the solutions that we came up with was a sensory program that would allow for players to be monitored while they're playing. And for instance, if an individual took a shot to the head that registered enough G's to potentially have registered a concussion to them, then these sensors would go off and they would send a signal to a supervisor on the sideline, giving the individual's number, individual's name, so that they can get pulled out of the game immediately. It doesn't allow them to stay in the game and continue to get shots to their head when they're extremely vulnerable. The other nice thing about this solution is we'd like it to have a cloud software package to go along with the Bluetooth package that it has, because once this data is sent to the supervisor, we want it to go to a cloud area where the league can view it, the coaches can view it, the players can view it. Anybody who has access, who's privileged enough to have access, should be able to view this stuff regularly to again, for the player safety. If somebody's taking on too many hits, it needs to be addressed. So again, this is the first solution that we've come up with. We want something that's going to be more proactive, get players out of the game, than one that's going to be reactive. We found a company that actually has produced this this product. It's called Shockbox. It's very, very interesting product. They have a sensory sensor that goes in helmets, that goes in through some glue. It's ergonomic, so it's not going to be felt by the players. But once this sensor is put in, it's turned on, and it has that Bluetooth function for the individuals on the sidelines. And again, that monitor needs to be continuously watching these guys during practices, during games, to make sure that they're not incurring concussionary type hits. A couple other ideas that we put into play to go along with the technology is we do think that the league should implement some new rules. The first one being, if a player, if their sensor goes off and it shows that they had the potential of getting a concussion, that the player be removed from the game. They should be diagnosed by the doctor, but even if they're not showing symptoms, they should not be allowed to be going back in the game. Again, if the hit was hard enough to where they potentially could have gotten a concussion, they should be precautionary here and let the individual sit and rest for a day and come back and be re-examined again later on. Additionally to that, we think the league should have another official to come in and be an independent here and watch both teams. And if a player, if their sensor goes off, then the official should send a signal to the head official on the field to stop play and make sure that player gets off the field. Again, this is all done for precautionary reasons. Again, because what we found out of how these long-term issues really get exacerbated down the road. So again, these are two solutions that we came up with, and we think this will really reduce the number of concussions and long-term injuries to players down the road. again, going forward, our objectives for this project, really what we're trying to do, we want 100% implementation by the preseason of 2015. We want a 15% reduction in the number of concussions. In 2013, it was in the mid 200s. Judging on how 2014 goes, but we would like to try and get it below 200. That would be a comfortable number, and have it continually drop from there. A 5-year goal would be to have the number of concussions under 100 per year. Again, some concussions unfortunately cannot be, because of the nature of the game, cannot be completely wiped out of the game. But again, we want to be precautionary and make sure those players don't have lasting injuries. We want to increase the number of players that are being examined. We don't want them, we don't want individuals to just use this this sensor as the diagnosing tool. We want this to be a supplement for the doctors. We want to increase the play of Pop Warner of kids. We want the league to start having that pipeline of young talent coming back. Right now, there's significant drop-offs in Pop Warner and in high school football because of the concern of concussions and the long-term effects that they're seeing. And lastly, we want to make the game safer. By making the game safer, by making the players' careers longer, it's gonna reduce the liability on the NFL. Hopefully by 100%, but if not, at least they'll reduce it by some. The timeline that we have for this project is basically, we're going to start in phase 1 on October 1st. This is going to be the plan description period, where we're going to submit the plan to the NFL, to Roger Goodell, make sure he approves it. We're also going to send it to the NFL Players Association Union to make sure they understand what exactly the product does, how it functions, and what the end goal is, and how it's going to benefit the players and the league in the end. From there, we're going to go to phase 2, and that's going to be the selection period, where we're going to look at all the opportunities, we'll look at all the opportunities, make sure that we're making the right choice, get demonstrations, do cost benefit analysis. From there, we're going to go to stage 3 or phase 3, which is actually going to be the training. As I mentioned, we want officials, and we want teams to hire new individuals to help monitor this. The team hiring a new supervisor should be able to train other individuals on how to use this product. They should be able to train the coaches and players and stuff. So there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for them, but that's going to be done in the second quarter of 2015. From there, we're going to implement the plan in the preseason of 2015, and then that'll be phase 4, and phase 5 will be the review, which there's going to be 2 reviews. One of them is going to be in October of 2015, and then we're going to do the final review of the project in December of 2015. So from there, we've talked about the recent lawsuit. I want to give you some numbers to kind of put this into context of how future lawsuits can plan out, because this is the precedent that is basically set at this point. So there was 18,000 retired NFL players. There's 4,500 again partook in the lawsuit, which is about 25%. So again, the number was $765 million lawsuit, and from there, when you consider how much each plaintiff got, it was about $170,000 per plaintiff. So now, taking a look at the future and the projected lawsuit that could come if the league doesn't make any changes, okay, looking at the costs, the costs here, going forward, the current number of players in the league is at roughly 1,900. That's 32 teams, 60 players, so it actually turns out to be 1,920. The average turnover in the league right now is about 6.25 years. That's calculated by taking the 20-year duration that we're looking at, plus the average life of a football player, and average playing time is 3.2 years, which again gets us that 6.25. So when you consider the number of players that are currently in the league and you project them out over the next 20 years, you're looking at about 12,000 retirees in the next 20 years for the league that could potentially sue the NFL again if these procedures aren't changed. So if we take the same number, 25%, we get 3,000. 3,000 lawsuits at 170,000 each. You're looking at $510 million lawsuit that could be awaiting the NFL here. When we look at the benefit of using the shock box, you know, the per sensor it's $150, which is it's a little bit expensive, but considering what it does, it's actually rather worth its value. We're going to need 2,880 sensors per year. Okay, the reason why that is each sensor has a lifespan of 500 hours, and each player has helmet time of 410 hours per season. So again, we'll have to update them every year. Given that number, we're going to spend about $432,000 a year just in sensors. Okay, not terribly expensive, but it's a nice chunk of change. From there, again, we mentioned we want to hire some new officials to be nonpartisan and be non-biased here. With 16 new officials, because we're needing one new official for each game, the cost is going to be about $480,000 additional funds needed for this year. And then lastly, the team supervisors, the team administrators, that cost is going to be about $1.9 million. So at the end of the day, the total cost per year is about $2.8 million to implement this new project. Considering, when you're comparing the two and figuring, $2.8 million is quite a bit to implement. Well, take a look at it over the long run. This plan would cost the league about $56 million over the next 20 years to implement. Considering, as we talked about before, the potential lawsuit and projected lawsuit of not doing anything would be about half a trillion dollars. Okay, so over that period of time, your savings is about $450 million. That's substantial when considering, adding those numbers do add up over time. One projection that we did run was if you took these numbers and the lawsuit numbers and you inflated it for a moderate inflation of 2.5%, the lawsuit in 20 years could actually be potentially $13 billion. So again, we're running it off of the half a billion, but again, if you adjust this for inflation, you can see how even more of a savings it is. So a couple other benefits that are tangible that we can see. We want to reduce the number of players getting injured, not necessarily to the head, but just in general. The less players use their head in tackling and playing the game, the less injuries there are. We want there to be we're going to get a compatible cloud system that we can store this data and use it to look up historical data on players to make sure that, hey, if this individual is taking on way too many hits, we need to address it, and maybe we need to have a career talk with them. And we want quicker responses. As the player gets hit and that sensor goes off, this is going to give a great benefit to get those guys off the field and reduce the number of concussions. A few intangible benefits that you see. We're going to build goodwill. You're going to see that the NFL is actually doing something positive to prevent this issue and that they're taking it seriously. They're going to encourage safer play by, again, reducing the use of individuals' heads in tackling and using basically in tackling. You're going to use this device to train individuals. For individuals who are using their head in tackling too much, they can show them, hey, look, the sensor keeps going off. You're using your head too much. You need to get it out of the way. And this will show them, again, this can be utilized for the NFL and for Pop Warner in high school and college training as well. Again, this will help increase the chances of the long-term viability of the NFL because it's going to lower the chance of negligence on the league. Some of the risks to this, well, obviously, if the sensors don't work properly, if they're just sporadically sending in signals, well then it's not going to be a very good monitoring system. It's just going to be more of a supplemental system to doctors. to say, hey, look, this individual had registered a hit hard enough, we need to check him out. But again, it's not going to be as effective. So that's our top concern at this point. The next would be that the doctors, again, use this primarily as their diagnosis tool. They don't take the time to actually go through the steps to diagnose the concussion. They just say, hey, look, this guy registered a concussion, so boom, we're checking him on the list that he had a concussion. And that's not fair to the player, going forward. The doctors need to continue to do their jobs and monitor. A couple other things, a couple other ideas that we talked about with changing the rules. I think it's imperative that the league changes these rules and gives these players and the teams time to get these players out of the game. Again, we're going after player safety here. That's actually, as much as we want to reduce the costs here, player safety is number one, because that's inherent for us to reduce the costs of the league. And lastly, the sensors could break. Players could lose them. A football player could get hit and it could break the sensor, and that would cause the league to buy some more. But again, if we're $450 million under, I think the firm can, or the league can afford to spend another $150 here or there. Another analysis that we ran was a sensitivity analysis, and the reality that we have to look at is, what if the league doesn't get 100% absolved of all liability? Yes, maybe they're not negligent, but hey, look, they still had some liability here. Well, that's a consideration that we took here, and the analysis we ran was, if the league only gets absolved at 50% of the lawsuit, how would they fare by implementing the strategy? Well, as we mentioned, it was about $56 million to implement the sensors over 20 years. And if 50% of those lawsuits are again reduced, the number would be about $310 million that the league would end up having to, at the end of the day, doling out, which is still substantially lower. It's about $200 million lower than if the league did nothing. So again, and at the end of the day, the $200 million is great, but again, you're helping the league out, you're helping the players out, and you're making sure that the league can continue to function for years to come. A couple of the alternatives that are there that we chose, that we looked at. First one is Rydell, very, very formidable company. Most people know them. Anybody who's played sports growing up has known Rydell. They actually created a new sensory helmet, actually a new helmet that utilizes more pliable plastic. Right now the plastics that they use are very hard, so they don't absorb the hits. Rydell created a new helmet that's supposed to absorb the hits much better because the plastic bends, and there's an ergonomic cushioning inside there that, again, is supposed to help out as well. None of this is proven. It's all a new product, so we can't hold our hat on it. But inside that helmet, they did include a sensory package, which is very similar to shock boxes. All this is very interesting and very intriguing, but it's costly. The helmets can run anywhere from $300 to $400, and that doesn't include the $150 sensor that goes along with it. Now, the sensors can be purchased without the helmets, and if we did that, we just purchased the sensors, and we considered Shockbox to Rydell and try to do apples and apples. They're both very similar. They both have the same function in regards to the Bluetooth and the sensor, but Rydell doesn't have a cloud program. So that is one very important tool that we'd be missing out on, and that would require the supervisors of the team to go ahead and take manual data input, and that can open up to user error. So again, very, very formidable competitor to Shockbox, but again, unfortunately, the fact that they don't have a cloud system, we really do think prevented them from winning from winning here. The next, there's a couple universities, you may have heard of them, Stanford and Arizona State. They've come out with mouthpieces that are supposed to detect, again, very similar to the sensors in the helmets, the impact of a hit to the helmet or hit to the head, and once they get a hit hard enough, the sensors change color. Very interesting, but there's a couple problems with this. The sensor hasn't been, or the mouthpiece hasn't been released yet. It's supposed to be coming soon, but they just haven't come out with it on retail yet. So NFL would have to wait to implement this, and with that, we don't know the cost. To go along with that, with the mouthpieces lighting up, it's going to be very difficult for people for the sideline supervisor, for the refs, for anybody to recognize that this thing's actually changed colors, particularly when there's a bright sun out. So besides those, there's no Bluetooth to send a signal, and there's no cloud. So again, an interesting competitor, but again, we like this shock box better. A couple other ones that are a little different is the additional padding. There's a company out of Georgia called Guardian who actually has an external padding that is that reduces the impact of the helmets by 30%. It's actually supported by a lot of retired and former players who actually used them a long time ago. They said that they could feel a different sensation when they took a hit, but again, looking at this, the cost is $60, so it's obviously cheaper. Problem is, it doesn't do anything to tell anybody that if a player's gotten a concussion. There's no Bluetooth, there's no cloud. So again, it really it's more of a pure concussion reducer than it is a monitoring system. So following is the lighting signal. This is a new Reebok product that came out. It's basically a spandex hat that goes underneath the helmet, and in the very back there's a light that lights up when a player again gets a hit similar or that would register the potential for a concussion. The light turns red when the hit is hard enough. And again, looking at this, very interesting product. Costs $150, which is the same as the Rydell and the shock box. The problem with this is it's very difficult to see in the back of somebody's helmet, particularly if they have hair, particularly if it's in the sun. It's going to be very difficult for anybody to look from the sidelines or a ref to be able to see that player. So again, doesn't have the Bluetooth, doesn't have the cloud, and it would require manual data input at that point. So again, very neat product, but Shockbox again was the whole package. The last, we took a hybrid of a few of these products. Of the Rydell, and again, such a great company, has the name. Again, just didn't have the cloud software to go with it. So we took a look at some companies that could offer Rydell's program the ability to have cloud on it, and we found one, and it was called the Zen app from Citrix. Basically, it would allow the free access, the remote access that we're really looking for all privileged individuals to look at the data from, whether it's their tablet, whether it's their phone, whether it's wherever they're located, wherever they're at, and this gives them the opportunity. The problem with this, the cost to implement this, we'd have to do a subscription for each team, and it would cost about $96,000 a year, which would be close to about $2 million in additional funds for the 20 years. So again, at the end of the day, when we look at all the solutions here, Shockbox has the whole package, the sensor, the Bluetooth, the cloud, and really think that will set the league up for a good start to really taking this concussion issue head on, and showing that they are doing their diligence to try and prevent this problem going forward. So, just wanted to finish this up, kind of tie it all together, give you a couple quotes here that I think will give you the mindset of some of the players. And one of them is, the bigger the game, the better the chance that I'm not going to come out for a concussion. And that's from Cameron Wimbley of the Tennessee Titans, who's still playing. And then there is the quote from Super Bowl winning quarterback Jim McMahon from the famous the Bears said, "I can't even remember why I walked into a room," in an interview that he had with 60 Minutes. This gives you two different perspectives, and implementing these sensory systems to help out players, I think, is really signified in these two quotes. When you look at a player like Cameron Wimley, who is looking very short term, is getting caught up in the emotions and wants to stay in the game, and is not looking after his long term health, you can see why these guys get sucked in, and they need somebody to monitor this stuff for them. And I think with using these sensors and having the league step in to kind of be that big brother that protects these guys for the long run, it will really go a long way in helping reduce the liability and negligence for the league. So that's my presentation for today. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned a little bit, and we'll see what's to come here in the future.